I guess that almost everyone in the world ever, as a child, has been asked, what do you want to be or what do you want to do when you grow up? Remember what was your answer to that question when you were, let's say, 6 or 7 years old, and when your teacher asked that? So, can you remember your answer at that question at the age of 6 or 7? And how many of you, please raise your hands, how many of you are doing today exactly the same job as you wanted as a 6-year-old? Well, just a few of you. Well, as a child, as a very young child, I wanted to be a painter. And that was actually my childhood dream. And at the age of 12, I started getting courses from painters and other art professionals in order to improve my skills and to learn how to paint and draw. So by the end of my 4th grade of high school, I was taking those courses. And when I graduated from high school, I actually didn't want to go to the Academy of Fine Arts because my idea was that I actually know how to paint and draw, and what I didn't know was how to sell the paintings. So this was high school me preparing for one of my very first exhibitions, and I was already into that business and actually into those activities, but I wanted to transform it into business. So I enrolled the college where I could have classes of economy, finance, marketing, and so on. So I was actually doing it, and I enjoyed that because I also had the courses of fine arts. I could combine it with it. So I really enjoyed my studies. I started to love economy and finance. And after the first year of studies, all students from my college were obliged to have 3 months of work experience. Not only in order to get some money, to earn some money that students actually needed, and not even to just get some working habits that students needed even more, but also because we actually needed to see in which direction we want to develop our careers in future, and also to see what courses to take in the following years. So I actually chose banking because the idea of banking actually was very interesting to me. It's not working. So the idea of banking was very interesting to me because I'm a passion in mathematics and finance, and I really love working with the numbers. So actually it was very interesting that there's a possibility, but also I like the idea that in future I saw myself as somebody who can create economic and financial policies in order to help local economy to prosper in terms of helping entrepreneurs, small business, and even artists to get the access to finance. So my idea was to get hired in a bank, which I did actually. So I was hired by a bank, one of the leading one at that time, and most of my colleagues were people over the age of 60. Most of them were very experienced bankers, people with a big knowledge of banking, who were perfect people to learn from. It was 2004, and not so many people in our environment had the possibility to use the computer for banking purposes. So I was coming every morning to work with my laptop, where I had installed not only Excel but also Minitab, a statistical program that actually helped us do all the reports very fast. So I really enjoyed the fact that I was learning from them how to do the banking business, and the people who spend all their life working in the banks still had the chance to learn something from me that has actually doing her very first job, and that is actually still helping somebody to get some job faster. So I really loved my job and sharing all this knowledge between the colleagues who are even 3 times older than me, and the whole idea that actually we're sharing not only knowledge but also the respect. So everything was perfect until one day my boss came to the office and gave me the list of the clients who actually had the biggest debt toward bank, and he told me actually try to contact them and to warn them because they're late with their payments. So I checked the banking database. I actually got their contacts from there and started calling one by one. So some of them answered the phone and told, okay, thank you very much for reminding me. I almost forgot the due date and I will make my payment these days. Some of them explained that they have some financial issues and that they actually have to come to the bank next days just to see the possibilities for reprogramming. One man answered the phone and told me that he recently lost a member of the family and that it's not the time to think about the credit. I told that to my boss, and I explained him what was happening, and he told me, look, the fact that he cannot think about the credit is not the response, because we are not a charity institution and we cannot be that sensitive. And at that moment, I felt like I was doing something that is completely wrong, something that is completely unfair. The job that I liked to that moment very much, I started hating. I started hating my boss, I hate my bank, I even hate myself for allowing myself to do that. However, I continue coming to work every morning with the same working habits and still with the willingness to learn something from it. But when my contract ended, because I had to go back to the studies, my boss told me that actually he's very sorry that I have to leave, that he understands that I have to enroll in the second year, but actually that he wants me back next year. And I said, think about it. I said, I will think about it not only, this was actually the fact that I knew that I will never ever again step into that office back. But actually, I didn't lie. It was a promise to myself to think about it, to rethink about what will go on in my life in the future. So as a painter, I have to rethink the role of a creative soul in a world that is so strict and seems so cruel to me. So I was perceiving things from my perspective and see that actually there is no, the painter can actually find no place in a bank, because I was seeing the things from my perspective, checking, for example, how the paintings that were all around the bank were put in the balance sheets of the bank. And what I saw actually, since they're all bought on the auction, those prices are calculated in the banking balance sheets that are actually not reflecting the price that those paintings are actually quoted in the gallery. So, which means that what's in the banking balance sheet doesn't actually correspond with the real market prices, which made me think even more about the whole thing and think about all those items that are in some, not only banking sheets of the balance sheets of the bank, but also in the balance sheets and the documents of all other financial institutions, such as stock exchange markets, other central banks, governments, funds, and so on. So there's so many things such as commissions, shares, dividends, other prices that are charged in that way, futures, and so on, that are all made up. And if you can really accept it, the fact that actually so many things are made up and artificial in the financial world, you can live with it. The thing is actually that one thing that was very interesting for me was the commission that is charged every time one single transaction is being performed. And every day on Earth, we charge so many transaction costs and commissions that actually the value of all resources or the human, the human world has. In some sense, then from that perspective, for me, it was very interesting to pay attention to the euro. The euro as a single European currency that once I remembered that I heard that it's actually invented in order to connect all the countries by not having a commission on currency exchange. It was so challenging for me that because of that, in order to try to make some academic researches, I also enrolled the studies of European Union law. And my banking background actually helped me not to take European Central Bank policies for granted. So I was researching all those possibilities to have one global currency. The idea about global currency was so interesting for me that actually I was trying to rethink how actually the world will look like and how many money will be saved if there will be only one currency in the world. And I know that for some of you it might sound like some verse from John Lennon's song Imagine, but actually it's actually something that is possible if, for example, there is a compromise about it. So I continued doing some researches, some other activities in my passion for mathematics and finance, and trying to find solutions. I wrote so many theses, I wrote articles, I even published a handbook about how to apply some finance, apply some policies as a response to irregularities of finance. And there's one thing that actually interested me most, but everything started one rainy afternoon in November 2012, where I actually was checking the several websites that I usually checked in order to see something new and interesting, because in the eve of financial crisis, 2008, yes, that wasn't the perfect timing for starting the own business, but I did it. And from that moment, I was actually struggling to find some new possibility to earn money in the financial world, but in terms of some, for example, in terms of providing some financial services for my clients that were waiting for new information. So at that time, I was checking the technological sector that was the most inspiring for me, and I was checking how some innovations of the company are actually shifting the share price of those companies up and down. So I was giving the advices to my clients what to sell and buy in that terms. And when I saw several articles about not only Bitcoin, but blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies as such, I was interested in researching it even more. So at that moment, I started rethinking how actually would be to apply all these technology in some other fields. I wasn't one of those persons who just wanted to go into the Bitcoin world and earn from switching of its price. I actually started to research how the possibilities it actually can get. Because at the very beginning, when Bitcoin was introduced to me, its code was so small that actually if I invested several hundreds of euros at that time, I would be a millionaire by now, which I'm not. It doesn't mean that I actually don't like money, but the thing is actually that I don't think that money should come fast and overnight, just when you invest some money and do nothing with it. I believe in the process of earning by doing, and this was actually inspiring for me to research. So when I started teaching about it in several universities and institutes, I actually started exploring even more and answered to all those questions that were posed to me that made me research further to that topic. And when I actually started researching it, I saw that actually blockchain is very similar to my primer job. Actually, that's very similar to arts, because the rules of it are so simple that it can be compared to arts. Because first of all, it's fair and it's simple. It's simple for people who use it. It has very simple rules, very few rules that are pretty simple, but it's actually very complex to people who are not into it and who are trying to understand it, but are actually rejecting its the nature that it's actually something that's very fair. So I was doing also the paintings all the time, and I then never stopped it. But actually the thing is that blockchain inspired me so much that I even stopped painting for a moment. And I was trying to research how actually it would be if, for example, this type of technology would be applied on some other levels. I was thinking, first of all, at the beginning of my career, I experienced how, for example, there's so many actually cruelty in the human nature in business relations and in relations towards the clients. So the thing was actually that I was trying to find out what all the people that do not even get the basic level of respect or the truth or even the minimum of justice could be helped by this type of technology, because it offers prosperity. There's a possibility to get justice from it because everything is transparent, everything is fair, and everything that is going on through this process is actually visible. So there's so many legal issues that could be solved via this platform, because it actually offers the possibility to be fair towards one that you have some relations to. And it's also securing human rights in that way, because the more justice there exists, the more human rights are respected. And I was coming back to the beginning of my story, where actually I was thinking how actually it was similar to the very first idea that I had about my career. So in researching this type of technology, this seems like a response to all negativity in the financial world that we've seen starting from the global economic crisis 2008 until now. We actually see how one technology is actually being developed in the same principles as art is being developed from the beginning of the history. And it was a very big lesson to myself. And at that moment, I realized that actually my childhood dream was actually the best business advice that I actually had. And not following your childhood dream and abandoning it is actually the biggest mistake one might make, because it makes you all for a lifetime doing something that you actually shouldn't do and doing something that actually not comfortable with. So if many of you made a mistake in that way, try to remember that childhood dream that actually was something that should be your guideline in the future, no matter how old you are and no matter which professor you choose. And if you still cannot accept it, let's make sure that your children do not make the same mistake.